Our next guests know firsthand the dangers faced by prison staff behind bars. Former prison officer Ryan Goodenough was left in a coma after being brutally attacked by inmates at a facility for young offenders.
Ryan joins us now alongside former inmate Raphael Rowe, who spent 12 years behind bars for a wrongful murder conviction and has since dedicated his life to shining a light on the prison system. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for coming in this morning. Ryan, can we start with you? So you started your work in a youth correctional facility. You were just 21 years old?
Yeah. It was a secure training centre, so it was more about therapy and rehabilitation. However, because of the no-refusal policy and the overlay and the overspill of other institutes that support children, it was effectively, youth.
Correctional facility?
Yeah.
So you were very young at the time. You were only 21. How long had you trained to get the job?
Well, you did 9 weeks of training, so it wasn't a lot. But when I kind of talk about why I got into that sort of work, I do recognise a lot of it comes from my early years and the journey that I had as a person. And that kind of led me into wanting to work with children. So talking about training, the direct training was 9 weeks, but I suppose you could argue I trained my whole life for it.
Sure.
And can you tell us what happened the day of the attack and how it occurred?
It's a really long story, but to keep it short and sweet, I was on a unit, so part of the role is to just be with the children and you've got to safeguard them, make sure that they're okay, make sure they're well, make sure that they're safe. They have these allocated slots for activities, so they can go out and go on the AstroTurf, they can go into the sports hall, go into the gym. And there was a bit of a dysregulated vibe to the morning. There was a few incidents in the day, and then I got moved unit in the evening, so I was working a day shift from about 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. And when I got moved in the later shift, it was very heightened. It kind of felt all over the place. A bit tense, yeah, I suppose you could say. I've walked in, I see settees flipped up on the side, I see boys just causing.
So there was a febrile atmosphere.
There was a bit of that, yeah, a bit of that. But I got on really well with them, so they've walked in, they've seen me walk in and they've thought at this time for activity because they'd missed it, they were a bit late, we were short on staff, so I took them out to the AstroTurf, as was allowed, that's what was set up for them, and then when I got onto the AstroTurf, we radio through, we say we're secure on site, we're secure in this location, and then I just see a boy trying to effectively escape the AstroTurf, not
climb a wall.
Yeah, no, he was trying to climb the fence.
Right.
So it was only going to be escaping. I use loosely, but he would have been escaping a place where I said it was secure. So he was trying to get over the fence into the basketball court, and I'd gone over. Before I went over, I'd put my body-worn camera on. I'd pressed for first response, meaning that I'd called for staff to arrive to assist me. But then I've just seen him climb in, and then I've tried to verbally bring him down. He hasn't listened, but at that point, criteria had been meant to use reasonable and proportionate force.
Right.
So I've guided him off, and then I've had, suddenly, this one boy has become free, and then I've got 3 of them trying to put him on the floor, stayed on my feet, and then I've kept him at arm's length.
Right.
And then as they're at arm's length, 2 more come in, and now I've just got 5 boys kind of laying into me. So
and they knocked you to the ground?
No, so I wasn't actually knocked over. They tried to take me down, but, I mean, I managed to keep on my feet.
Can you ask how old they were? Right.
So they were aged 14 to 16.
OK. So young teenagers?
Yeah, young teenagers. They were children. They're children, and...
It's interesting because you've described them as children quite a lot, and but, of course, they were children that attacked you physically, and that attack led to you going to hospital.
Yeah.
And then ending up in a coma.
Yeah, but they still are children. So I still work with children, and when I went to hospital, a coma wasn't on my mind. I thought I had concussion, and then suddenly it just started to bleed out my nose, and I started to vomit blood. I got taken through to this ward just to be checked, and then I got put on my back. I kind of laid down, looked up, see the bright lights, kind of like I'm looking at now, and I looked left, looked right, and then suddenly I just fell asleep, and I woke up 3 weeks later.
3 weeks later?
Give or take, yeah.
And what do you think should happen to the prison what do you think should happen? Do you think that Supermax prisons would be a good idea, based on your experience?
Well, my experience is individual to me, and my personal opinion is that we have to approach things from a point of therapy, and we have to be trauma-informed. When we look at prisons, whether they work or don't, that's up for conversation. But what we see is we see individuals who are suffocated by trauma, they're living with trauma. And when we don't put enough support in place for that, situations like this happen. I was in court reading a victim's personal statement when the boys were being sentenced, when the children were in court, and I said quite strongly, and I stand by it to this day, they were fighting the uniform, they weren't fighting me.
Right.
So it's that the perception of anger and aggression is always what you see on the surface is anger and aggressions. You kind of label them as aggressive, bad children or bad humans, bad people. But beneath that, there's usually fear, there's anxiety, there's trepidation, there's worries, there's concerns. Emotions we all feel, but some people aren't developed enough by the right people.
They still attacked you, though. They still attacked you, put you in a coma for 3 weeks. I think a couple of them got extra time on their sentences, one of them 18 months, one of them 6 months. And the reality is that they felt empowered, angry or frustrated as it was, to attack the uniform that was there to keep them safe. That's all you were trying to do. You didn't want him to hurt himself, the lad that was climbing the...
But I see the argument of empowered or not. I think it's almost baseless without looking at the fear, without looking at the trauma.
Sure.
My role wasn't to condemn them or to lock them up. My role was to support them and help them. And the way we do that is to see them as children. That's why I'm very heavy on using the word children, because I do stand by the fact they were fighting the uniform, not because it was specifically that uniform, but because I was authority. I was telling them what to do. And we're all products of our environment. Some of us are victims of it.
Yeah.
Well, Raphael, I mean, if you look at your experience, you are absolutely a victim of your environment because you ended up spending 12 years in prison for a crime you didn't commit. You've since gone on to explore the world of prisons around sort of the globe in order to understand how best to rehabilitate prisoners, what the prison system is like. What's been your experience of that, both as a prisoner and then going into prisons and exploring what they're like globally?
Yeah, I think, I've seen it from both perspectives. So as a prisoner who often got into conflict with prison guards, violently attacking prison guards myself, being attacked by prison guards because of the regime or the conditions within the prisons, the Supermax, you could say, prisons that I was held in here in the UK. I was held in maximum security prisons in the UK. Conditions are really, really bad. But after being released and my convictions being overturned and becoming a journalist, I have travelled the world documenting life inside prisons around the globe. And the difference is extreme. You have really humane conditions in Scandinavian prisons where, you enter the prison, the officer reaches out and shakes your hand and makes you automatically sort of disarms that aggression that you go in, this kind of aura that you take into a prison, whereas in other places I've been, Supermax prisons, prison officers don't go within 10 metres of the prisoners, and when they do, they're holding shotguns, and prisoners have to put themselves behind their cells or their pavilions, and then the guards retrieve and the gates are locked, but they don't go within 10 metres of the prisoners. They're so dangerous. So the extremes can be both ends. That's been my experience.
There's been an increase in attacks on prison staff. We've seen the two that we mentioned in the film beforehand, and there is concern about prison staff, and it's an amazing amount of compassion that Ryan has for the children, as he describes them, that still attacked him and caused him long-term damage. He has a long-term brain injury from that attack. Do you think the introduction of Supermax-style prisons for our most dangerous offenders here in the UK is the right way to go?
I think we have to bear in mind that a prison is just a symbolic structure, right? It's just bricks and bars and barbed wire, and it's secure. It's the people that are in these environments that you have to concern yourself with. So if you put a bunch of guys and women, because there is an increased number of violent attacks by female prisoners on prison staff and females, even though the prison population for females are a lot less. So it's the people that are in the prisons. And for me, if you put a bunch of violent prisoners, and I think a third of our prison population are in for violent offences, if you put them into one environment, it's a boiling pot, isn't
Yeah.
it? You know, not only will they attack themselves, but as soon as they're let out of their doors. And I'll give you an example. You know, when you lock somebody behind a door like I was, and my circumstances were slightly different because I was innocent, right?
Yes.
But I was angry.
Yes.
But anybody, guilty or not, you put them behind a door for 23 hours a day, not only are they banging their heads against this square space, but then they're on their hands and knees and behaving like an animal. So you open the door and they're going to go woof. They're going to want to bite you. They're going to want to attack you. So you've got to do more. So whether it's a Supermax prison or one of the prisons that already exist, it's what you do in those environments that matters. So are you trying to rehabilitate these individuals who are behind these doors, behind these walls, or are you just trying to contain them, i.e. it's a detriment, you know, it's redemption, it's kind of punishment, that's what prisons are for. And I don't think I've met anybody in the 20 years I've been a journalist looking at these issues, I don't think I've met anybody in that time that has said to me they don't believe in rehabilitation. They want people who have gone to prison to be punished for what they've done. But during that time, whether it's a Supermax prison or not, they've got to be rehabilitated, whatever that entails, you know. But the majority have issues that, you know, Ryan has identified, mental health issues, you know. So Supermax prisons or mental health institutions. For me, I think the government would be better spending their money on mental health institutions to address the kind of underlying problems that drive the criminality and the behaviour of people that end up in prison.
We've done a poll here on the show. Should the UK introduce US-style Supermax prisons? 93% of people think yes, 7% think no.
I think one of the difficult things is when you see the perpetrators of the attacks we've seen most recently.
Yes.
So Axel Rudakubana, we know what the atrocity that he committed, and then to attack a prison guard as well, and he's only young, right? You can understand why our viewers would be, absolutely, these people need to be kept away from the prison guards who are trying to rehabilitate them, who are trying to help them and keep them safe.
Then we talk about trauma some more, and I can't speak on that incident. I don't know the story or the situation, but we don't wake up one day and think, I'm going to go and do a madness, I'm going to go do this, I'm going to go do that. The problem that we have is there isn't enough early intervention, there isn't enough work in primary schools. We've got mental health services that if you're 16, 17 years old, there's no point even referring you to it, because by the time you reach the top of the list, you're an adult, you're no longer eligible for the service. So mental health is, I think, as Raphael was saying, that's where the focus needs to be. If we want to prevent people committing acts of such devastating incidents, and it's not something that, again, I would comment on because I don't know the ins and outs, but certainly when we look at prevention, we have to be looking at doing it early as opposed to reacting by building things that are effectively already in place, just being a bit more punitive, perhaps.
It's fascinating to get your insight. Thank you both.
I could listen to them talk all morning.
Ryan, thank you. Appreciate that. And also Raphael as well. It's certainly a subject that we need to talk more about, isn't it? I think ultimately.
Yeah.
There's no easy solution.
No.
There isn't an easy solution. I think that's the important thing, isn't it? Because it's really interesting that you say 93% or whatnot people believe in Supermax prisons, but that's headlines, right? I mean, anybody who walks into a prison will see an environment where the guards are doing the best that they can, the prison officers, the staff that work in it, the auxiliary staff, the probation officers, and all the other people that give up their time to work in these environments around the globe, and I've seen it, the scale has been very different. But at the end of the day, we have 90,000 people in this country out of a population of 70 million that are in prison, and the majority are in there for economical crimes rather than violence. So are Supermax prisons the right places for people who are desperately trying to overcome the crisis that we are under at the moment? And I think we have to ask ourselves those sorts of questions.
Thank you both for coming in.
Oh,
hello. Thank you for visiting our This Morning YouTube channel. We upload tons of new content every single day. So hit the subscribe button, like all the videos, and don't miss out. We'll see you in the morning.